it up, right, Katie?
Yeah, just once we are live, I will put it up.
Okay, so we're gonna resume our work and deliberations on the amendments for the response to Executive Order 203. We have about 5 pages we've got to cover, and there were some items hanging out from yesterday, about 3 or 4 of them that we needed legal clarification on or advice. I sent a request asking Linda Kingsley to help us out with that if she could. So let us start where we left off last night, please.
I just have to catch up 1 second.
Okay.
Okay. So we were on response to mental health calls. Number 3, evaluate the PIC team. I think we had gone over this one. I just cannot remember what we decided. But there was a PAB recommendation, and Councilmember Melendez had made a comment, but not necessarily a recommendation.
Okay.
Oops. Councilmember Gruber is joining. I believe Councilmember Melendez's recommendation was around streamlining all of the different things going on, so FIT, FACET, and PIC, correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I think it was made multiple times yesterday, so we have to.
Yeah. 1 second.
So this also essentially captures also what PAB recommended with the excess. It's not saying drastically increase, but it says to increase it appropriately.
Does it say linking the budget to the number of calls that they're taking? Because that was in the PAB recommendation.
It says upon review of the metrics of the Office of Crisis Intervention pilot, but that's within 4A.
Right. I see.
So I had a chance to sleep on this because this is where we left. And one of my thoughts, just thinking about, and I don't know if we can designate or appropriate dollars to this from the federal funding that we're anticipating, but given the pandemic and all the mental health related issues we've had recently, I'm wondering if this is something we can, similar to the dash cam concept, say that we want to significantly designate funds to this area.
Would you want to, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is that a possibility, I guess is the question.
So it's sort of 2 questions. One is whether or not the funding could be used for that, and the other is whether or not we would want to indicate that.
Yes.
So is that both the 2 prongs of your question, Councilmember Melendez?
Yes, Madam President.
So our current funding level is 600,000. So I think we know that we have to drastically increase it.
I think the issue, and good afternoon, everyone. I think the issue is using the stimulus dollars on it is potentially boosting up personnel in certain places that when that money's gone, we are left scrambling for it, which is why I think that the right move is to use the language around right sizing the RPD and finding existing personnel dollars to pay for an increase in PIC. Because then in 2 years, when the stimulus dollars are worn off, we actually have a process for continuing to increase in the mental health response as needed versus hoping and praying for more federal dollars.
Yeah, I agree that the funding has to be sustainable, and the PAB's recommendation to tie it to the number of calls, I think also speaks to, that reallocation, because as the number of calls that PIC team is increasing. It's taking away from things that police would respond to, or drastically reducing it. And it makes sure that they have the funding, available commensurate to what they're taking on.
So where do you all stand with that? I don't have a strong opposition to that.
I think there needs to be something that obviously says something about make sure that there's a commitment to funding.
So I'm hearing a lot of people talking about funding. We could put the word drastically back in, because that was taken out, and or put the deadline back in that was also taken out from the PAB recommendation for 4.
Also the sustainable piece of ongoing support.
And I still would like to see something in there that talks about the county in terms, and also looking at the scale, because how you're going to get to the scale is in terms of pooling resources from the county and city to address mental health. You just can't be the city addressing it. Because we don't have the resources, and the county's budget is bigger than ours, and mental health falls under them in terms of a community, the community spot where it rests. They have an office of mental health and all those types of things. So I like to see that woven in there to say that we would also look at, in terms of creating a larger scale to cover more folks in a larger area, make sure that we are integrating with them in some way. I don't know by when or where, but I think, and I know we talked about that somewhere else in this.
Yeah, I thought we had that in one of our items.
So that's already in there. I don't think it needs to be redundant, but repeat it.
Yeah, it sounds very familiar. I think we did talk about that, because the concern about the city taking on the whole brunt of this without community partners, particularly county.
I know that Councilmember Melendez kind of summed up that for a suggestion for number 4, if you want to touch on that.
Let's see.
Yeah.
That covers it.
I would say instead of reallocate or, I would say reallocate and. Because this is definitely going to reduce load on the police.
Okay, and so Councilmember Melendez, were you thinking of putting this? Where did you want this to replace 4 or to go in as a C? Under 4?
I'm trying to remember at the time.
I'm trying to quickly think it through as well, and it's not working.
It seems like it replaces the top line of 4 and A. But the B part doesn't seem reflected.
Yeah, B is definitely its own thing.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay, so we'll replace the first sentence and A. With what Councilmember Melendez has written.
And are we okay with changing the sentence reallocate or seek outside resources to reallocate and seek outside resources?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Fine with that.
It also seems that like the assure the current county might be an A, and that first paragraph is the top line. Does that make sense?
So you're saying this would all be the top line? This is A.
Well, maybe A and then B.
And then C.
Can we
Yeah.
just leave it like that? Change that one word and go.
All right, next. Are we okay with 3 as is then? Because that was 4.
Yeah,
Yes.
amount
Okay.
for it, yeah.
Do you want any timeline for increasing of funding? Oh, I'm sorry.
this budget.
Miguel says by the end of 2021, so it'll be end of
I
calendar
think
year
it's,
20.
it ends up being in this budget cycle, right? So
Yeah, I would think it would have to be by June. So we
Are we
don't
okay?
want that gap between June and the end of the year.
Is everyone okay with that?
So it would be the end of calendar year 2021?
No, I think they were saying the end of this fiscal year, so June 30, correct?
Well, how the budget for this fiscal year is already done.
Yeah.
So how does that happen?
We amend it
I was
or ask for it to be amended.
as we do the budgeting for the coming year, that's where I think, at least in my head, that's where I thought, you know, we would be allocating some resources to mental health.
Mhm. Which would take us to the end of the calendar year, right?
Yeah, but President Scott, don't you think in some ways that this document should signal what some of our budget priorities would be? I mean, in this case, asking, I can't imagine that receiving this document, there isn't a way to make it clear that we are asking for an increase in PIC funding. There can be an argument about what the right equation or formula is based on, you know, tied to calls to 911, based on the different metrics. But I do think that we should signal that we expect there to be a significant increase in this upcoming budget cycle.
Well, but the budget cycle is in progress and the end of the calendar year is in the next budget year, is it not?
Right. But
Okay,
I'd like to see a budget that we vote on in June that includes
Right.
additional dollars for PIC.
Okay, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Which doesn't address. All right, where do you want
So
it in
by
this
July-
paragraph? Because it's the same place.
I think, you know, by July, we've allocated money for this.
And I guess I'm okay with the allocation part. But when you started talking about the actual replacement, when you're moving people around in 3 months, that's what was making me uncomfortable. The process for making it happen, I'm good with that. But the part where you actually do it, because we're talking about replacing social work, police with social workers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Should we delineate it out? Or are you just saying we'll
What?
trust that by, you know, that it's going to be funded in the budget if we're saying by the end of the calendar year?
That's the only way it could happen.
Yeah.
Because, but however, just so we can
I agree.
not get stuck on this, I think we're all wanting the same thing. If we could just sort of find out what would get us there most clearly.
Are we going to the next one?
So Katie, I think we're saying end of 2021.
Yeah, so it's good as is because
Okay.
yours has end of 21. Okay. Oh. For B, Councilmember Melendez had a suggestion to expand upon working with advocates in the court systems.
I think this was more or less the PAB's recommendation. I might have tweaked it. a little.
Yeah. The PAB's is up here and this is yours. I do think I agree. So yours would be adding officer involvement in eviction should be reduced. Social workers and community advocates should be
Mhm.
entrusted to co-create new alternative eviction responses, which is something that's happening.
Yeah, that's great.
It's happening.
I think I would just add maybe a deadline.
Do we want a deadline? I can check. I know that there's another spot in this where we added on stuff about the court system, and I can make those two deadlines add up or align.
Okay.
I
If
have
not,
a,
end of 2021 would probably end up being.
yeah. I have a C.
But
Ensure all responders are trained and receive coaching in culturally responsive care and anti-racist practices. I stuck that wording in the chat so you can copy it.
I'd like to include trauma-informed care in that too.
Yeah, I would imagine that that is happening, but it's really good to be explicit.
I think it might come up somewhere in training as well, but if we're good with C, I'll add that as well.
Yep, that's fine.
All right, moving on. Nothing until 4 for recruitment. Councilmember Lupien, you wanted to change it a little to reflect the recommendation, I think, in the raise report.
Yeah. And is Lachey on the call?
Yeah.
You are, yeah. So Lachey, the Creative Pathways to Public Safety Program, can you speak on that? Because it's what happened there.
Well, I mean, I'm really concerned about the conflict right now. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
Point.
Okay.
depending
So-
on,
So I think
yeah,
that it is not in existence anymore, if I'm correct. And so, I
that's
wanted.
not completely correct.
No,
Okay.
it's not gone. It's not gone completely. It's just different because of the pandemic.
Okay, so it's
But I
still
was on
there.
school board. I was on
Okay, I
school
guess I
board.
was just.
Go ahead,
go ahead.
Councilmember Evans.
No, I was gonna say I was on school board when this launched. What's your question, Mary?
Well, I knew that something had happened to it. And so I was unclear if it got cut or if it was just on hold because of the pandemic. And, if there was an issue with financial support that the district didn't have the money to pay for it. That's why, say the city will offer financial support to promote, expand, increase recruitment. That's why I was drawn to this. I know it came from the raise report, but
I
I
don't
wanted to
think
highlight that.
I don't think that necessarily is the case. And I'd be more comfortable if we were to sort of reserve the solution to better definition of the problem, because I don't believe the condition is what you described.
That may be. That's why I wanted clarification, but I understand the conflict.
Yeah, I would just use I mean, if it's in here, I would just use the raise language.
Yeah. Well, it is the raised language, I guess.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
just leave it at that. I would just leave it at that.
So add the language that you put in, Mary, because it's from the raise report. Sorry.
If we're okay with that.
Okay.
I will have to abstain from that. So from that
All right.
one, okay?
Okay. On to training. 4, select and implement a strong curriculum for responding thoroughly and effectively to the need for racial justice education of police recruits. It's another piece about white supremacy that didn't end up in the final language that came from PAB. It said the city must therefore craft and fund robust training on white supremacy and structural racism, training that must be transparent to the public, regularly conducted and closely monitored for the effectiveness on an officer by officer basis. So something we kind of touched on before with the white supremacy, but a little different.
So, Mary, yours just deals with pretextual
I think
stuff.
No,
that's
that's a different one. It's just this. I'll highlight it. It's just this one.
That just this one that does what?
So right now, it doesn't call out having
Okay.
training on white supremacy.
All right. So,
This also says monitoring effectiveness of said training on an
So
officer by
I'm-
officer.
the PABs, I think it's more inclusive.
Mhm.
Now, if we want to specifically identify, what is the white supremacy piece?
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's in there.
theirs. That's more, that's,
And I think this is another place where we could add in trauma informed.
Oh, I see. Right here. Okay. Next one. Provide training on the proper use of pretextual stop. Councilmember Lupian put in language from the RAISE report on pretextual stops.
so where did we have this at before? Was there a whole nother section that
Yeah,
we
there
talked
wa-
about this last night?
Yeah, I can. One second, let me pull it up on a different document.
Oh,
I think
so,
it
but
might
it's
have been
showing up here because of the training.
practice.
Yeah, so this is one of the examples of one of the sections where it overlaps in other things. Because we
Mhm.
talk about de-escalation later on, and that's the next one. We talked about that before. Let me find the language we use for pretextual stops. So under the policies and procedures, we added from the RAISE report, officers in predominantly Black and brown neighborhoods engage in a form of policing when is rarely seen in other communities. To address over-policing, Monroe County law enforcement should end the use of pretextual stops and decriminalize and deprioritize violation level offenses. So that's in a different section,
Mhm.
but it does specifically say Monroe County.
So it doesn't provide training on the proper use of protection. So 12 doesn't come close to, not really, to what Mary has with ours. Or am I missing this?
This
Yeah.
12 is weird because in another place it talks about banning pretextual stops. And then here, which was already in the report, and then here it talks about providing the training on the proper use, which I don't know what the proper use of a pretextual stop is.
Yeah, that was the part that I was having cognitive dissonance with. It's like pretext. So why is it okay?
Yeah, VP Lightfoot, I don't know if you remember this, but I seem to remember this being part of some of the conversations we had, and I recall there being some back and forth on whether or not banning or trying to limit through training pretextual stops was part of the discussion. It seems like we didn't rectify it before we got to this draft report.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Also, the other place that it's mentioned is when they're talking about creating rules and banning discriminatory policies, and then it says in parentheses, example, textual stops, and lists other ones, so it's not necessarily saying it would 100% be banned.
Yeah, I don't recall that particular conversation, Councilman Melendez, but I do like the text from the Race Commission.
I agree with that. I think if we can utilize the Race Commission and just put some context around, I mean, I guess the question we should have is, are we training for this or are we banning this?
That's the question. Yeah, that is the question.
Maybe that's the one we get some clarification on from the chief to see, where we are with either training or banning, et cetera, because we're not going to be able to answer that question, right?
Right.
I heard some agreement on this language. Or do we just want to understand RPD's idea of how a pretextual stop could be equitable?
I think the clarity would be definitely helpful. They may explain what they view as equitable, and they may have a plan to make it equitable.
I mean, I would be in support of outright banning, but I'll also say that those things don't happen overnight. And the language around training here from the race report is useful. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't use this language here and continue to have a conversation, as I'm sure we will, about a million things with the chief around the process for banning these.
Mm-hmm.
I support that, Mitch.
I'm good with that.
Okay, so
I'm in
we'll use
agreement.
this language and put that in there and move on.
Okay. $14 is about a pilot program for mindfulness-based de-escalation, anti-racism, wellness, and resiliency training. And Councilmember Lupian wanted to replace it with this longer piece. Is this from some? Oh, it's okay. You said it.
Yeah. So it adds in, because this talks about mindful policing, but adds in certain other pieces and kind of gives context to why it's important.
At the risk of sounding ignorant, what is mindfulness?
It's I probably am, there are other ways of describing it, but I think it's the practice of being aware of your environment and your breath to train yourself to be more aware of your internal workings. So it would decrease that reactivity.
So how do you pick one approach to that kind of awareness? This one approach, I don't know, is it new, whatever it is.
So mindful policing is a thing.
Uh-huh.
And I just kind of added in another approach through Cities for Peace, which is around yogic breathing and meditation. to just kind of like expand the possibilities of what types of programs we could use here.
But
it almost sounds like another work session.
I'm telling you.
Just to understand. I mean, you know, and I know it's in originally, you just expanded on it, so it's not a push at you, Mary, because it's in there.
Yeah.
But you know, it is some, you know, it's new, right? It's new for some of us to idea or concept. So for me personally, because I don't fully understand the concept, right? I would probably stick with the original, because you know it's a pilot program. So I would want to know more about the direction we're going on with that before I start expanding it into other areas when I'm having a hard time just grasping the concept.
Mary, are there cities where you think there's particularly good mindful policing practices happening?
Well, I know they've done it in LA with success, and Minneapolis is also kind of looking at this. And I've been in contact with the city council folks in Minneapolis around it.
Maybe the recommendation could be leaving it as it is and specifically highlighting an opportunity to connect in with the Los Angeles and Minneapolis police departments to figure out how their mindfulness training is going and be able to benchmark and develop trainings with them through work sessions and things like that.
I like that, Mitch. And let me give you an example. That's kind of what we did with our PIC team. You know, we kind of started a pilot and then we brought in the Cahoots folks for some training and to expand us and move us a little bit forward in some of their experience. So to me, that makes a little more sense.
Mary, does that work for you?
Okay. So we will move on.
This isn't a note on 16, it's a note to add another number, so it'd be 17. Councilmember Lupien on.
Yeah, so this is kind of related.
Excuse me,
There's
I'm just going to ask a question real quick. Katie, why is some of it on the right side smaller than others? Some font that, you know, sometimes like Melendez's font is larger and Lupien's font is, I'm having a hard time reading the stuff on the right. Is it just me or does everybody, it seems kind of small.
Katie, if you hover over it, does it get bigger? No.
This is what happens. Let me try. I can make it bolder, but that only makes it.
Oh, that makes it worse for me.
Yeah. Let me try one more
You
thing.
move the tab over to the left, does it make that whole part wider?
No.
This is as wide as it gets.
Okay, no problem. I'll manage.
Oh, it just went a little, but.
So this just talks about the training being done with the community. So Cities for Peace does this type of mindfulness training, but with community members. So it has kind of like the benefit of reducing incidents of police brutality, but it also has shown benefits in community to reduce violence. And it humanizes people as they get to know each other. So it was just another, you know, example of a program out there that's doing good things.
Cities for Peace is an organization that gets contracted by municipalities to come do this training.
Mm-hmm.
So are you recommending that that's something that, I mean, we could perhaps put in a recommendation that that's something that's on the table for a fiscal 22 contracting?
I mean, I wanted to put something in there to lay the foundation of exploring and looking into it. So not naming, a particular vendor, but their style of blending community involvement in the training. So I guess, what would you suggest? Like, what are you suggesting?
Still kind of sounds like another work session.
I mean, to me, it sounds, Mary, like there's a number of, I mean, what I don't think this document is going to end up being is by itself a work plan for how the chief goes through and does training. I think there's still a lot of work to be done to bring this into implementation mode.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a way to add this language about cities for peace and the community engaged trainings along with the mindfulness trainings to say that there's frankly a number of trainings that are potentially outside of anything that RPD's considered before that we want to put in front of them through a series of conversations, work sessions with RPD leadership, and get some new trainings on the docket for this upcoming year. I just don't know that we're gonna turn this. I think part of the tension is trying to turn this into a work plan when that's not what this actually really is.
Well, I don't see it that way. And I didn't have the opportunity to be on any of the committees that contributed to this plan. And I don't see how the things I'm suggesting are all that different than the things that are in here, other than they were suggested by other people at a different time. So I'm not trying to make it a work plan, but the wording is explore, so it's just, putting an idea in there. So I guess I see it a little bit differently.
Sure, I'm more than happy. I'm happy for it to be included if others are, as something to explore. I just think there's a way to package all of these together as something that we actually have the opportunity to put in front of the chief's face to explore and to actually have to grapple with and be able to show. I mean, I think that's why our colleagues are talking about work sessions, so we can actually share some things with them. And I think just adding more numbers and bullet points and these examples, I'm not sure is as meaningful as lumping it into one potential recommendation around additional trainings and finding time with work sessions to actually force them to grapple with it.
I agree with you, Council Member Gruber, because I think a part of the problem is there's a lot in here. There's an awful lot. And when we pile on these various models without having other prior discussion with folk who are impacted by them, I think it takes away from the potential acceptance of them. I think there's a way to approach this, which is not just sticking it in here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to belabor the point because I don't think.
Don't then. So can we move? I don't hear readiness to put that in. So can we just move on?
That was to the conclusion. So that's, unless there are changes on the conclusion, that's the last thing I had. Were there any points that I said?
We didn't talk about violence prevention. I don't know if that didn't have I don't think that had a place.
Let me grab.
Was that a category?
No, but it was a raised recommendation. Was it? Maybe.
I'm sure it was. The two things that I wanted to talk about was violence prevention and then the impound reform. And I understand that, these are work sessions and potential legislation, but I'd like some mention of the importance of these things in the plan. And so, I'm open to a shorter version of what I submitted.
I'm pulling
now,
up.
We talked about, I'm remembering talking about violence prevention, right? Did we talk about it last night?
I don't remember.
I don't think we did, Mary.
No, we didn't. Okay. It's a little blurry. I know, Miguel, you had submitted some resources on violence prevention too. So these recommendations are taken from Oakland and, no, I'm sorry, Richmond, California, and Minneapolis. And it's this, I guess there's two things in here. One, which is the violence prevention model that recognizes that gun violence and violent crime in particular are, studies have shown, are concentrated on a very small number of people in our community. And they're, either gang or social network involved. And so, we know who the people are, and it's not that they're bad people, it's people that need support. And these Advanced Peace and Operation Ceasefire in Oakland have surrounded this small, in Oakland, it's 200 people. Rochester, it's going to be less. Surrounded them with resources, daily mentorship, making sure they have a safe place to live. If they want to get out, making sure that they have that credible messenger to help them out of the life. And it's been shown to decrease gun violence dramatically. And then next step, yes.
I got a question.
Mhm.
I don't mean to cut you off. I just got a question. Isn't this like some of the same, the gun violence prevention is the same thing that's done by the Coalition of Gun Violence, the coalition that we already have?
The Rock Against Gun Violence.
Yep.
Is it providing mentorship and surrounding
We have,
specific individuals with services?
if you look at the whole platform that's been outlined, there's so many different pieces that touch on that. And I'm not trying to say that
Yeah.
what you have is not good. I'm just thinking that maybe that's the platform that you want to present this to.
I think
I would have to agree with that. With the Executive 203, I think with around policing, and with gun violence, you're talking about that. Some of the Chicago model that you're mentioning, we currently
it's not Chicago.
huh?
It was in Chicago, Oakland, and Richmond.
But you mentioned Chicago, the ceasefire. You mentioned ceasefire.
That was Oakland.
Well,
Maybe Chicago has one too.
all of them originate from Chicago.
Yes.
I put it to you like that. All the ceasefire. I spent last 3 years of my life working on gun violence. So, this work here, in my opinion, I agree with Councilmember Harris that I would like to have a broader conversation with Commissioner Torres, the Rock Against Gun Violence folks, and maybe even the mayor administration, because a lot of these, like the credible messengers, the mentoring, a lot of the pieces, I like some of the information, but some of this stuff is already modeled in our current Pathways to Peace program and some of the other work that we're doing through our homicide response programs and some of the work that we're currently doing right now could be enhanced. I totally agree with that.
Absolutely. I'm not saying to replace anything that we're doing. These are, models to look at and incorporate.
I don't think
if there's things that we like.
Executive 203, that's all I'm saying. I don't think that it fits there.
Violence prevention doesn't fit in our executive order.
And these programs, these are programs, right?
I said violence and
some of these particular things that you're referencing may complement some of the current programs that we have. I didn't say violence prevention doesn't fit. I said what you're presenting as far as some of these.
Well, I didn't get out what I'm trying to present, and I was just explaining these programs that I have in there. And there's, if I can just get 2 minutes.
Go ahead.
So this is about institutionalizing violence prevention. So we can have programs like Pathways to Peace and like the ones that you're talking about, but they can come and go. And if it's a office, so this is talking about an Office of Neighborhood Safety. Minneapolis calls it Office of Violence Prevention, but to put it in the fabric of the government and invest in it, because we know how impactful it is is what I'm suggesting, that we put
Mary,
some wording around.
that's one of the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition recommendations.
Yeah.
The Mayor's Office of Violence Prevention. We mentioned that 3 years ago. It's in the
So
action.
I'm building off of what you're saying. I'm not trying to overshadow the work you're doing. I'm just trying to get some language in the executive order around institutionalizing violence prevention, if that's the right word, but like investing in it and, exploring these types of programs, or exploring what we already have to see what can be, increased in terms of support.
Councilmember Lupian, with all due respect, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but I feel as though the Executive 203 order is for recommendations for things that we're really not doing, and things that we need to expand on. I mean, a lot of the things that you mentioned are things that we are already doing.
Oh, I'm sorry, but a lot of this plan is stuff that we're already doing, that we're augmenting and adding to. How is this different?
Councilmember Lupian, I'm not seeing a willingness to go further with this.
Can we hear from other people? Because we've heard from 2 people. So I just want to hear what other people think.
Okay.
I can't imagine why we wouldn't put violence prevention in this plan.
Hey, Will, if the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition has already put in a recommendation around the office of what was it called exactly, Will?
It's different in different places, but the Mayor's Office of Gun Prevention, the Mayor's Office of Violence Prevention, Office of Violence Prevention, Newark, New Jersey. We've had, extensive conversations around this work. And, a lot of it comes down to funding, quite naturally.
Sure. Well, I mean, it would seem to me like it's if that's already a recommendation on the table, and this is essentially echoing a lot of that, it would seem that it's at least worthwhile putting in here. Again, this document is littered with vague language about making considerations. But if we're going to be doing that anyways, why don't we just put in there that we want to consider the creation of the Office of Neighborhood Safety / Office of Gun Violence Prevention as something to do in the 22 or 23 timeline.
I'm not.
VP, if you were to put your recommendations in here, what would that look like?
This is not about me, and I'm not prepared to give that type of, that's not what we're here for. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, for language of considering looking at an Office of Gun Prevention or something of that nature, I would be in full support of that. But some of the language that you're using in this are programs that have been in existence for 20 years in this city. The Pathways, to say that the programs come and go, Pathways of Peace been around for 20 years. That doesn't come and go. That's not
the support for it has been decreased in certain budget years.
We just increased Pathways of Peace staffing and budget significantly over the last couple of years.
Okay.
Go ahead and get some. We'll go outside in a little bit.
So it sounds like we have agreement around supporting an office within the mayor's department regarding violence prevention.
I didn't hear that. So
I thought the conversation started talking about the programs that were out there, and we said kind of having an inventory of the programs that are there, and then seeing what might want to be expanded, funded further, etc.
And this would fall under that, right? It would get captured with that.
That's what I thought. Yeah, that's what I was hearing from. That's just me being quiet and listening to all the sides that were just talking. That's what I took from the conversation that I just heard back and forth. Unless if I'm wrong, correct me. But that's what it seems like. It's okay to mention violence prevention, but it's important to assess what we currently have and then have a larger conversation going forward on what else might need to be added. And to Mrs. point, okay.
Well, can I just ask a question? I mean, seems like we're all over the place here. We completed number 13. We completed number 14. We've completed number 15. We completed number 16. Those are all complete? Okay, so,
We're done.
so,
No, we were done. Mike, we're not all over the place. The last point
Right.
was on this
Okay.
violence prevention thing. So we need to just
Okay.
wrap up that.
so are we looking to add a section on violence prevention? Is that what we're looking to say? And we're trying to wordsmith those last couple of things there?
I guess what I was doing was just listening to the conversation. I just regurgitated what I heard to try to put it
Right.
together. Where it falls, I have no idea. I was just
Okay.
trying to put a bow on the conversation that was going back and forth around violence prevention.
Right.
So do we feel as though we've mentioned violence prevention somewhere else in the document?
It isn't mentioned in the document.
It's not mentioned.
Not
Okay.
mentioned. Yeah.
But the
So what is-
conversation was in the context of talking about policing.
Mhm.
Violence prevention obviously is something that
Mhm.
folks thought was an important point. So that's what
So,
we're doing there.
guys, look at A and B. I think we're doing A, right, with the homicide response team. And B, I think, is not mentioned in this plan at all, but I'd be
No,
in
B
support.
might not be mentioned, but that's actually happening. I've seen that happen there. There are different entities in there. So I think what we should be asking for is a survey and a holistic understanding of what current violence prevention models are functioning. So let's find out what's out there. We should know or find out, okay, what's being done in the realm of violence prevention currently, and then make a recommendation to revisit it and come back and look at the items that you're presenting and seeing if that's a direction we want to go. But
Yeah, that's what I just said, and that's what Lachey said that she was okay with. That's
yeah. So that sounds like we got some consensus around that.
I also like to add that maybe we should move that under F, police policy, strategies, and practices, so it flows
Well,
well.
this is outside of the police department, though.
Okay, all right then.
So
Okay.
maybe is the PIC team, is the mental health, is that its own section, or is that under something else?
I believe it's its own section. I'm checking.
Mm.
Yeah, it's response to mental health calls. So it's mental health, but it's specifically the response to it.
Yeah.
So we want to add a section basically asking for a survey and a listing of current violence prevention programs in the community. And then we want to say that we're going to make a commitment to expanding violence prevention programs to fill in gaps that may be identified. Is that what we're looking for?
That sounds good, Mike.
Okay, so let's say that. Let's put it in there.
That's
Let's get
perfect.
the conclusions.
I'm
One
good.
second.
Okay.
The only section I think it could go on under without it being its own is, I had it, a community-oriented culture, but we could either do that or add it as its own little tidbit.
You can find some place to put it, Katie. We won't. We trust you.
Okay.
Well, but my only concern is if you throw it in there somewhere, it'll get lost.
Yeah.
Well, if it's in the plan, anything in here could get lost. Which
Well, yeah,
was
but if we're
part of my concern about just piling stuff on.
right. But if we
Yeah.
add this as a little bit at the end, then it's at the end and we know where it is. The stuff in the middle is the stuff that I'm worried about getting lost. But the stuff at the end, people read the front, they read the end.
Yeah,
I'm in favor of making it separate.
that's fine.
Me too.
Okay.
One
Okay.
one
So
final.
what else do we have to do?
Well, just
So-
one thought on the last recommendation. I don't want to belabor the point, but I do think that separate and apart from the Executive Order 203, we should have a wider conversation. I've also worked with Pathways to Peace for a long time. I think we have a lot of bones, but I think we need to think about if we need to add more meat to some of these programs and services. And the model has shifted. I think VP Lightfoot, you might be able to attest to this, that over the years, the way that we've deployed Pathways has shifted multiple times. And I don't know which version of Pathways is the best version, but I think we should evaluate that too.
I totally agree. I think this should be like a whole conversation around gun prevention that, you know, we need to have. And I've been
Yeah.
trying to have for quite some time, to be quite honest with you. But it'd be nice to have a more comprehensive and collective voice on that issue. I think we'll go a lot further. So I agree. The conversation needs to continue. Definitely.
And part of that conversation needs to be where these guns are coming from. In the words of Nino Brown,
That,
ain't no Uzis made in Harlem, ain't no Uzis made in Rochester. Where are these things
That.
coming from? And that, you know, that's a, yeah, I agree. In terms of that,
That-
be a major conversation.
All of this work is the Rock Against Gun Violence Coalition has had.
Yeah, you guys are in it.
can we get a work session
All of
with
these
you guys?
conversations.
That's exactly what we've been
As
working
last
on.
month, Kathy Richardson committee is literally working. The Advocates Committee is working on legislation that I think all of you got a copy of an email to send to your legislators around putting forth a particular piece on the gun dealerships to have like a memorandum of agreement that they have to sign on how they operate their gun dealerships with the county. So there's some state legislation, there's some county legislation that we've been advocating for around, because majority of these guns we know are stolen, and they end up coming out of, a lot of them, some of them come from out of state, as well as from a lot of the gun dealerships that are some of them been robbed just
Multiple times.
You understand what I'm saying? So that's what I'm saying. We've been having these conversations for a long time, and that's not to discredit what's being said here right now. I'm just saying that in order for us to move that particular work forward, I think engaging the individuals who have been working on this stuff and doing this stuff for a long time would be the best approach, I think, to going about doing this. Because again, we're having those conversations, and those meetings are always open to anyone to attend. And that's that. I'll leave it at that.
So we still have some tabled stuff.
We have what, Katie?
We had a couple of things that we tabled last night.
I have to be excused. I'll see.
I gotta go too. I have a commitment. I apologize. It's 5 o'clock.
Okay. This accountability one is a tabled one?
Yeah, so it's right in the beginning, fully comply with the PAB's authority as outlined in the charter.
What was the PAB's recommendation?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up, one sec. The PAB's recommendation was the city shall take whatever legal and policy steps are necessary to fully protect, support, and ensure cooperation with the PAB's investigations into individual RPD officers, as well as the RPD's policies, practices, and procedures. And then Councilmember Melendez, you had put develop streamlined and efficient processes to ensure the PAB can function in fulfilling its duties in a timely manner with the proposed deadline of 6 months. President Scott had said add by April 1st of this year. Which I can switch to.
So the one about the April 1st of this year was with which one though?
Let me switch so that you guys can see.
Yeah. Because mine was really in.
So yours would have just said fully comply with PAB's authority as outlined by April 1st of this year.
Yeah,
A
little different.
Thoughts?
And my thinking is that it'll be included in this memorandum of understanding that's being developed now. So if it's not that, then next week probably is too close. So we might want to rethink that.
Okay.
Are we putting in Councilmember Melendez's edit?
Putting in what?
I don't know.
The develop streamlined and efficient processes. I feel like that spells it out.
And that's, where's that?
It says develop streamlined and efficient processes to ensure the PAB can function, fulfilling its duties in a timely manner. Be had within the next 6 months. We could always do the end of the current fiscal year so that it's somewhere in between those two dates.
And President Scott, this might be actually in your MOU, I'm not sure. But I was thinking about, making it clear when body cam footage would be released, when
Yeah,
documents
that's in there.
kind of things.
Yeah,
Yeah, when, yeah. So what is in the PAB's recommendation is, what I think gets at is if the administration isn't complying, that we're promising to go to bat for them to get what they need. And I think that's missing in what's in number 5.
I don't have a problem with the PAB's recommendation. Because technically that's the road we're on. The fact that we're in court right now defending,
Right.
that's the road we're on. So I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
So do you want to do PAB?
Yes.
Okay. There was one other tabled item. Let me pull it up.
Thanks for keeping track of all this, Katie.
Anytime,
No,
maybe.
hopefully not.
So this is under the technology one. Oh, it says my screen
Right.
share is paused. Can you guys see the Word document?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
We had tabled adding the list of specific technologies. I may be opening a can of worms, but
Where are you at after some sleep, Mike?
oh, I thought you were asking me. Are you there?
Is he gone? Let me see.
He's 2 of them.
Oh, then he's around.
One of them's got to be there.
No, my position hasn't changed. We don't need to add the whole list of technologies because we don't know. It's better to, we'd be better, my opinion is still, we'd be better off asking what they currently have and then understanding that than trying to say in the future, thou shalt not, because we don't know where technology is going.
We're not saying that shall not. We're just saying create policies for data release procedures. We're not banning anything here.
I believe the council president's memorandum is dealing with data release privileges. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's already covered somewhere else. We don't need to specify it here.
What memo?
The MOU.
No. Does it though? You're talking about with the police accountability board?
Yes.
It covers technology data release policies?
It doesn't say technology. It talks about data and information and how you get it and how quickly you get it.
I thought
What
that
was
this
that?
was for the public, not for the PAB. Like something to include on the open data portal of what technologies the RPD uses and why.
President Scott, last night we were talking for a little while about how some technology has to come to council for approval and others doesn't, and some things do and some things don't. I mean,
Right.
we're talking about creating a whole lot of public processes, but the nature of having something come to council and being voted on at a public meeting is public. Is there a way to just say that all technologies that are any new technology used by the RPD has to come through council? Can we insist upon that?
We can, but I'm just wondering what kind of stuff that also includes, whether like their, let's say the laptops that they have in the cars,
Mhm.
or they're not laptops, what, those, what
Yeah.
are sort of like laptops. So stuff like that, or is it, or is there a way to narrow it a little more than that?
I mean, the ones that I have listed out have to do with privacy. ShotSpotter, I think, is a little different. And I would imagine body worn camera would be included. It's around data collection, I would imagine, because the video is data, the ShotSpotter is data, and then the privacy stuff is data. So could we say data collection technologies?
Where it says and use of all of its data, you would add data
Well,
collection.
Yeah, I guess that would be leaving out the whole military technology too.
Well, we talk about military equipment, not necessarily technology, in one that we added,
Right.
which is something we're going to just check
Yeah.
on wording in a second. So
Yeah, I guess we don't, it's kind of vague because we don't know what technologies, if it's, down to a laptop or facial recognition. We're not delineating that. I think for me, like, this is stuff that I know people want to know about, but it's not an exhaustive list.
Could we say data collection and surveillance technologies, and that covers a lot of things and not have a list?
Yeah. And if we cover military in another section.
I wouldn't be looking. Well, I mean, is there a consensus that we have to change this section? I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about it, but do we really, and Mary, I know where you're at. You certainly want to make changes. Are there other folks that seriously want to make changes to this section?
I mean, I don't feel like we have to make changes. I think if we could, I don't know if we need to say this in the report here, but if we can get a list of all technologies that are used so we can have an understanding, as you said, Mike, and then maybe get that list updated on a somewhat consistent basis.
And did we ask for that somewhere?
we ask for, it's under here.
Would you all be opposed to?
Wait a minute. Katie, did we ask for it somewhere?
Yeah, I'm just trying to pull it up, but it's very far down. Let me find it.
Well, I mean, I know we asked for it.
We
so, I
asked
mean,
for it. I think the wording could be vague in what we get back because we talk about military equipment. So we ask how they define military equipment, what we have, and how we're using it.
okay. So, I mean, look, I'm perfect. We don't have to give it perfect. It's good as it is. Let's get it done. Let's agree to leave it as it is, and let's move on to the next.
Well, that's your opinion. I just want to add.
No, it's my opinion. Yeah.
That's what
Okay,
we're
I just want to
given here.
say
So,
one more thing. What if we said including data collection, privacy, and military technology? Just my point is technologies is vague, and they could leave off some of the things that people might be concerned about. So just to delineate the groups and not specific technology.
I heard a term, I'm not sure who said it, but it was specified as data collection and surveillance
Yeah.
technology, because the stuff that really, the whole surveillance thing and the collection of particular data sets. So can we sort of encapsulate it that way?
Yeah.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Data collection and surveillance technologies.
Yeah.
Data collection and surveillance.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
I just want to go over this one section that we added also to data, because it was when President Scott said something and everyone liked what she said, but then she didn't know what she said. I also didn't know what she said.
Oh, what was that about? Let me
So
see.
this was what you said, and I tried to make it what I think we were getting at.
Okay.
The city will take action to ensure the demilitarization of the police department,
Yeah.
including but not limited to providing a breakdown of the military equipment RPD possesses, what capacity any city-owned equipment is used, and clarify what constitutes military equipment. And then you said this piece about to help council, to inform council's approving of future equipment purchases. Do you want that part in writing? Because I put it in writing. It is a little awkward.
Someone made the comment that we approve equipment purchases, and I don't, that's done in the extent that it's done is in the CIP. But we do things like the weapons, things like that. I don't know if that was a consideration.
I know we were also talking about if they acquire it through other means. You know, like the federal program where they're not actually buying it. Does that
So what was
come through us?
that sentence, Katie?
So so the city will take action to ensure the demilitarization of the police department, including but not limited to
Okay.
providing a breakdown of the military equipment the RPD possesses, what capacity any city-owned equipment is used, and further clarification of what constitutes military equipment. I forgot the word, to help the or to better inform the council on future equipment purchases.
Okay, so we can do that, but it's purchases or acquisitions.
Okay. Okay. I think that is everything. I know Councilmember Gruber, you had talked about possibly wanting to do an introduction in the data section, and if you still do, we can work on that offline a little. If not, it will go in as currently stands.
Yeah, I'm happy to try to that was just a section that was particularly meandering. So I'm happy to try to provide some language, Katie. We can have a quick conversation tonight.
Yep, and we have until I think tomorrow at 2 to get the actual like final thing to law, but there's stuff that has to happen before we get it over there, obviously.
So we may have to take some leaps of faith on the questions that are outstanding that have been posed to Linda Kingsley. So she may or may not be able to get those responses back today. And we've got about three items that fall in that category. So we have to sort of get that resolved.
And then the one outstanding question about the right sizing, let me pull it up before I try to reference it. So council would like an explanation of what right sizing RPD would look like according to the data we have. What would this look number wise? Is that something that we are fine with asking and just hoping in good faith that we get an answer? Or do we want that actually within the plan somewhere? I think Councilmember Gruber had asked the question, and I'm sure you phrased it more eloquently.
Well, if I recall, in the PAB's draft proposal, like the first one that they did, there was a lot of data around benchmarking RPD to other police departments in cities roughly the same size. I think we ought to stick a number. I mean, President Scott asked me last night to stick a number in there, and I wasn't prepared, but I think we ought to stick a number in there and at least make that a point of negotiation, for lack of a better word. So I'd be happy to take a look at the PAB's draft tonight and look at what that data said and you know, and send something or provide it to you to send something to it in an email to folks, Katie. Or if
Yeah.
other folks have ideas, that's fine too. That's just one thought.
So I have their draft answers, and it does say on page 8 of their draft answers, Rochester has roughly twice as many officers per resident than the average city in this population range. And also we have 33% more officers than the average city.
But
So
didn't they
those-
also provide a table?
I just have the draft answers, which isn't their full draft. They have a bunch of comparisons to like Binghamton, Buffalo, Syracuse, Utica. I'm sure there's a table somewhere. I just don't have it in front of me.
It was a graph, I think.
I don't know about you, President Scott, but I would be interested in putting a number as a placeholder there, because I have a feeling that you know, people in government longer than me have probably heard this idea of right sizing the department for a lot of years. And I think that this is a useful place to at least, you know, draw a line in the sand, at least as a start to the conversation.
Interestingly enough, there's not been a lot of conversation about that. There really has not. It typically goes the opposite direction, which is how we got the 700 and some officers.
Right.
That people, each time there was an attempt to reduce the number, just in terms of budget considerations, there was this outpouring of opposition. So the desire to do that is now more evident than I've ever seen it. And that, granted, it's not across the board, to put it like that. But this is a unique time in the history of our city. So I believe there should be a number there. And, you know, it would take some focusing to make sure that it makes sense. And we also have to consider, does this plan have goals or commitments?
Are we passing this as a resolution or a law? Because I think that's the answer.
I think it's a resolution. I'll double check, but I believe it's a resolution.
Right. Because if we passed it as a law, we would be bound to it, you know, which I personally support. But a resolution, you know, that's promise. It's up to us to hold to it.
Yeah. Okay, so Councilmember Gruber, you were talking about a number.
I'm happy to put in some time and even call perhaps the folks who worked on the PAB. I really believe they had a chart or a graph, and I think benchmarking us, if we're completely disproportionately staffed compared to, say, Buffalo and Syracuse, it would seem like that's a reasonable place to at least find a number to start with.
So would it be like an at least and a percentage?
You like the what?
An at least percentage?
At least, is that what you said? At
Yeah,
least.
and a percentage. Is that what you're thinking, Councilmember Gruber?
Yeah, I guess I want to see what those. I'd like to find out what Syracuse and Buffalo are at, and ask Katie to send around an email to the whole council with what those numbers are, and maybe there's a pretty. There's a pretty logical number that comes of that, and if not, then we'll batter around through email.
Okay.
President Scott, can I also just say one other thing about what you just mentioned in terms of promise or commitment? I would love, there's no language in this quite yet, but I would love to see it. And I don't know that it goes in the document itself or if it goes in the delivery of the document. I think there needs to be, in addition to implementation deadlines, there needs to be an implementation plan for,
Oh,
some type of
absolutely.
monthly check-ins in terms of the same things that we get quarterly documents around, AR and things like that. I'd love to have mandatory documentation coming on this thing.
Well, I agree. And one of the first things we need to see is an implementation plan. A quarterly report would be based on that because we don't have an implementation plan right now. And I know that there was some concern about what was being proposed as the development of that plan.
Yeah, so the conclusion does say our PD chief will form a committee to turn the above recommendations into an action plan with priorities, timelines, measures by summer 2021. And my question was, is that summer 2021 deadline for when the committee's forming, when the action plan is forming? And I think that's somewhere where we could, if you wanted to, make it a more strict deadline than summer 2021.
I'm also hoping that the PAB can be a part of this process, because I understand that the chief has to implement some of this, right? But other things are outside of the RPD. And I think we need, another entity. And I think the PAB makes a lot of sense.
I'm still reading this. Is not accomplished within 1 year. Okay. Okay, any additional comments on this?
Just one, Katie, as we're going through and adding all these timelines back together for the full document. Sorry, that's my son. Can we also check it against that conclusion section to make sure that the timelines make sense with that?
Right.
Oh.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we probably got some real significant conflicts.
You're correct.
I mean, we may not be far off on it, but just to make sure that it seems like we can produce this, and there might be some that need more. I hate to say it this way, but there might be
some that need more time. Yeah, okay. Okay.
So this is what we had.
So, and I'm still considering the Councilmember Lupien's comment about the PAB being a part of the Chiefs Committee.
Well, I guess what, we're there's a lot of stuff in here that I think is going to be hard for the police department to want to do.
Right.
And stuff that is outside of the police department.
Right.
So I don't know if that's two committees or that the PAB is with the chief on her committee, because it seems like it's not just a police, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to make sure that we structure it in such a way that the PAB can be most effective. So if they are going to help be the truth tellers about the changes that are proposed, maybe they shouldn't be a part of that part of it. Maybe there's a review process or something that goes along that path. So I'm not,
Mm.
I haven't thought that all the way through,
Right.
but I think there is there's an important role for them in this. We just need to make sure it's in the right place.
Right.
But we're able to do that. I don't think we can solve that right now. We just need a little more thought, a little more conversation. All right, can we be done, please?
Yes.
So
I will
I
will spare you my impound recommendations, and with the promise that you will listen to me at a later date.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it's like serving something up to somebody. Really, timing is everything with that, right? You want to get the right kind of receptivity.
So you're saying 10:30 at night is not the right time?
No, no. Okay, so we still got quite a bit of stuff to do, at least Katie and Conda and the crew do, because we just got this text or email or something that says Tom needs this as soon as possible, right? I don't know what time it is, but it needs to be, this is gonna have to go. We're looking at tomorrow at noon. They're probably asking for it before that if we can get it. I don't think we can. We'll continue working on this, knowing that we got this to do. All right. So again, I thank you all. I certainly think Ms. Hasselwander, she's a marvel with those little screens and inserts and late night combinations. We do appreciate it. Conda, we thank you. And Hazel, I guess you're going to make sure that we conduct the meeting in decency and in order, as they say in the church, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So again, thank you. And we'll be reaching out for next steps from us all. And don't forget, our meeting is Thursday at what
4
o'clock? What?
4.
4 o'clock. All right. Okay. All right. We're